Zarak the Bloodfang adjusted his cybernetic eye as he scanned the contract details on his datapad. The blue glow from the screen cast shadows across his scarred reptilian face in the dimly lit cantina. Around him, the usual crowd of mercenaries, smugglers, and bounty hunters filled the smoky air with their chatter and the clinking of glasses. The job seemed straightforward enough. 3 human cargo vessels had gone missing in the Kepler Nebula, and the insurance company wanted them found. The pay was generous, 50,000 galactic credits per ship recovered. What made Zarak pause was the fine print at the bottom of the contract. Warning, human military vessels may be in the area. Exercise extreme caution. Zarak had been in the mercenary business for over 30 years. He had fought against the insectoid Kythera during their expansion wars, survived the plasma storms of Rigel 7, and even managed to steal a prototype weapon from a Vorthan research station. But something about that warning made his scales itch with unease. He looked up as heavy footsteps approached his table. Grimjaw, a massive bear-like creature from the Ursa system, dropped into the reinforced chair across from him. The table groaned under his weight. "You looking at that human cargo job, too?" Grimjaw's voice rumbled like distant thunder. His black eyes studied Zarak with interest. "Pay's good. Real good." "Too good," Zarak replied, setting down his datapad. "When was the last time you saw a contract this generous for simple cargo recovery?" Grimjaw shrugged his massive shoulders. "Maybe humans just value their stuff more than most species. They're weird about their possessions." From the next table over, a voice interrupted their conversation. "You're both making a mistake if you take that job." The speaker was Viren, a sleek, purple-skinned Nexari with silver markings along her temples. Her reputation as an information broker was matched only by her skills as a pilot. Zarak turned to face her. "What do you know about it, Viren?" She stood up gracefully and moved to their table, her movements fluid like water. "I know that 7 mercenary crews have taken similar jobs involving human vessels in the past 2 months. None of them came back." "7 crews?" Grimjaw leaned forward, suddenly interested. "What happened to them?" Viren's silver eyes gleamed. "That's the interesting part. They all sent their last transmissions from areas where human military ships were reported. After that, complete silence. No distress calls. No wreckage found. Nothing." Zarak felt a chill run down his spine. In his years as a mercenary, he had learned to trust his instincts, and right now they were screaming at him to walk away. But 50,000 credits per ship was more money than he had seen in months. "Maybe they just ran into pirates," he suggested. "The outer rim is dangerous." Viren shook her head. "I checked the records. The areas where they disappeared had been clear of pirate activity for weeks. The only ships detected in those regions were human military vessels." Grimjaw scratched his furry chin with claws that could tear through steel. "So you're saying the humans killed them?" "I'm not saying anything," Viren replied carefully. "I'm just sharing information. What you do with it is your choice." The cantina suddenly grew quieter as a new group entered. 3 figures in dark military-style uniforms walked to the bar. They were human, which was unusual since humans rarely visited this part of the galaxy. Their presence seemed to make everyone nervous. Zarak watched them order drinks, noting how they carried themselves with the confidence of experienced soldiers. They spoke quietly among themselves, occasionally glancing around the cantina with sharp, calculating eyes. "Speak of the devils," Viren whispered. "I wonder what humans are doing in a place like this." One of the humans, a woman with short brown hair and a scar across her left cheek, turned and looked directly at their table. For a moment, her eyes locked with Zarak's. There was something unsettling about her gaze, like she was measuring him for a coffin. She said something to her companions, and all 3 humans finished their drinks quickly and left the cantina. "That was strange," Grimjaw muttered. "Think they heard us talking about the job?" In this noise, Zarak gestured at the loud cantina around them. Impossible. Human hearing isn't that good. Viren looked thoughtful. Maybe. Or maybe they have equipment we don't know about. The conversation was interrupted by a loud crash from across the cantina. A Kithara warrior had apparently had too much to drink and was now arguing with a group of Vorthon traders. The insectoid's mandibles clicked angrily as he waved his 4 arms in the air. "This is why I prefer working alone," Zarak sighed. He stood up and gathered his datapad. "I need to think about this job. The money is tempting, but dead mercenaries don't spend credits," Viren finished for him. "Smart thinking." As Zarak walked toward the cantina's exit, he noticed a small device tucked under his table. It was no bigger than his thumb and completely silent. A listening device. His blood ran cold. Someone had been monitoring their conversation. He glanced around the cantina, but the 3 humans were long gone. Outside in the artificial night of the space station, Zarak made his way through the crowded streets. Neon signs advertised everything from weapon modifications to exotic dancers. The air recyclers hummed overhead, processing the atmosphere for the thousands of beings who called this station home. He couldn't shake the feeling that he was being followed. Every shadow seemed to hide a potential threat. Twice he ducked into side alleys, but if someone was tailing him, they were very good at staying hidden. His ship, the Scarlet Vengeance, was docked in Bay 94. It wasn't the newest or fastest ship in the galaxy, but it had served him well over the years. The hull bore the scars of countless battles and close calls. As he approached the docking bay, Zarak noticed something that made him stop in his tracks. There were fresh scorch marks on the bay's metal doors, and the security camera above his ship had been destroyed. Drawing his plasma pistol, he approached his ship cautiously. The cargo ramp was still locked, but someone had definitely been here. Footprints in the metallic dust around the ship showed that at least 3 individuals had walked around his vessel. He activated his ship's security system and ran a full scan. The results made his scales stand on end. Someone had attached several small devices to his ship's hull. They were sophisticated pieces of technology, unlike anything in the known mercenary databases. Zarak spent the next hour carefully removing the devices. Each one was about the size of a coin and appeared to be some kind of tracking beacon. The technology was advanced, more so than anything he had seen from the major galactic powers. As he worked, his mind raced. Someone wanted to know where he was going. The timing couldn't be a coincidence. This had to be related to the human cargo job. He thought about Viren's warning. 7 mercenary crews had disappeared. 7 crews that had probably been tracked just like this. Back inside his ship, Zarak poured himself a strong drink from his private stash. The amber liquid burned his throat, but it helped calm his nerves. He pulled up the contract again and read it more carefully. The 3 missing cargo ships were the Terra Nova, New Horizon, and Stellar Dream. They had been carrying routine supplies to human colonies in the Outer Rim when they vanished. The insurance company claimed they had simply lost contact, but now Zarak wondered if there was more to the story. He accessed the Galactic shipping database and looked up the cargo manifests for the missing ships. What he found made him sit back in his chair. The ships hadn't been carrying routine supplies at all. According to the encrypted files he managed to access, they had been transporting military-grade equipment, weapons, armor, and something called Project Prometheus that was classified at the highest levels. Now things were starting to make sense. These weren't simple cargo ships that had gotten lost or been attacked by pirates. They were military transports carrying sensitive materials. Zarek's communicator chimed with an incoming message. The sender was listed as anonymous, but the content made his blood run cold. Mr. Zarak, we know you've been investigating the cargo recovery job. We strongly advise you to decline this contract. Some jobs are not worth any amount of money. Consider this a friendly warning? He deleted the message immediately, but his hands were shaking. Someone was watching him very closely, and they didn't want him taking this job. The smart thing to do would be to walk away. Forget about the 50,000 credits per ship and find a safer way to make money. But Zarek had always been curious, sometimes to his own detriment. He made a decision. He would take the job, but he wouldn't go in blind. First, he needed more information about what had happened to those 7 mercenary crews. Zarek spent the rest of the night researching. He hacked into shipping records, news databases, and even some classified military files. What he discovered painted a disturbing picture. The 7 missing mercenary crews hadn't just disappeared near human military vessels. They had all been investigating similar jobs, cargo recovery missions that involved human ships carrying classified materials. More disturbing was what he found in the classified files. There were references to something called Protocol 7 and Human Defense Initiative Response. The files were heavily encrypted, but from what he could piece together, it seemed like humans had some kind of automated response system for protecting their military secrets. As dawn approached on the space station, Zarek made his final preparations. He loaded extra ammunition, checked his ship's weapon systems, and programmed multiple escape routes into his navigation computer. He also sent a message to Viren, asking her to monitor his ship's transponder signal. If something happened to him, at least someone would know where to look. The cargo recovery job was supposed to start in 6 hours. Zarek would travel to the Kepler Nebula, search for the 3 missing ships, and hopefully return with enough crew. The jump to hyperspace felt different this time. Usually, Zarek enjoyed the sensation of his consciousness stretching across impossible distances, but today it felt like diving into a dark ocean where unseen predators waited in the depths. The Kepler Nebula was 3 days away at maximum jump speed. During the journey, Zarek's sleep was filled with nightmares of empty ships drifting in space. Their crews vanished without a trace. He woke several times in a cold sweat, checking his sensors for pursuing vessels. The black ship had disappeared shortly after leaving the station, but Zarek knew better than to assume he was safe. If the humans wanted to track him, they had technology far beyond his understanding. On the second day of travel, he received a transmission from an unexpected source. Captain Thorne, a grizzled veteran who commanded one of the most successful mercenary companies in the galaxy, appeared on his communication screen. "Zarek, you fool!" Thorne's weathered face showed genuine concern. "I heard through the grapevine that you took the human cargo job. Please tell me you've come to your senses and turned around." Zarek leaned back in his pilot's chair. "The pay is too good to ignore, Thorne. 50,000 per ship." "The pay is a trap," Thorne's voice rose. "Listen to me carefully. 3 years ago, I lost my best team on a similar job. They were investigating a missing human research vessel near the Cygnus Arm. Good people, experienced fighters who had survived dozens of dangerous missions. What happened to them?" Thorne's expression grew dark. "They found the research ship, all right. It was drifting dead in space, no crew aboard. But when they tried to board and investigate, something activated. My team's last transmission was just screaming, and then nothing." Zarek felt his scales prickle with unease. "What kind of something?" "That's what I spent 2 years trying to find out," Thorne replied. "I called in every favor, bribed every information broker, even hired a team of hackers to crack human military databases. What I learned will give you nightmares." The transmission flickered slightly as they passed through a small gravitational anomaly. When it stabilized, Thorne continued. "The humans have a defense protocol they call Dead Hand. Any of their military or research vessels that goes missing automatically activates security measures. These aren't just simple self-destruct systems, Zarek. They're designed to eliminate anyone who tries to board or salvage the ships." "How?" Zarek asked, though he wasn't sure he wanted to know the answer. "No one knows for certain. The humans keep that information classified beyond anything we've ever seen. But from what I could piece together, their ships carry automated defense systems that can identify non-human life forms and eliminate them with extreme prejudice. Thorne leaned closer to the camera, his voice dropping to a whisper. I heard rumors from a contact inside the Galactic Trade Authority. They said the humans learned something during their expansion into space that changed how they view other species. Something about an encounter with hostile aliens that made them paranoid about anyone boarding their vessels. The transmission began to break up as Zarek's ship moved deeper into hyperspace. Thorne's final words were barely audible. Turn around, old friend. No amount of money is worth what you're walking into. The screen went dark, leaving Zarek alone with his thoughts and the steady hum of the ship's engines. He considered Thorne's warning seriously. The man had never been one to panic or exaggerate threats, but Zarek had come too far to turn back now. Besides, if the human defense systems were as deadly as Thorne claimed, how had anyone learned about them? Someone must have survived to tell the tale. On the third day, the Scarlet Vengeance dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Kepler Nebula. The sight before him was both beautiful and ominous. Swirling clouds of gas and cosmic dust created a rainbow of colors that stretched across space, but the nebula also interfered with sensors and communications. Perfect place to hide missing ships, Zarek thought. He began his search systematically, following the last known course of the 3 cargo vessels. The nebula was vast, and finding 3 ships in this cosmic haystack could take weeks without proper leads. Hours passed as he navigated through the dense gas clouds. His sensors picked up various debris and space rocks, but nothing that resembled human technology. Zarek was beginning to wonder if the ships had ever entered the nebula when his proximity alarms suddenly activated. Dead ahead, barely visible through the swirling gases, was the outline of a large vessel. As he moved closer, Zarek could make out the distinctive design of human ship construction. The name Terra Nova was painted on the hull in faded letters. Found one, he thought, but his excitement was tempered by caution. The ship appeared to be drifting without power, its hull dark and lifeless. Zarek brought his ship alongside the cargo vessel and prepared to dock. According to the insurance records, the Terra Nova had been carrying construction supplies for a new human colony. Simple prefabricated buildings, mining equipment, and food supplies. But as he reviewed the shipping manifest again, Zarek noticed inconsistencies. The weight distribution didn't match what would be expected for construction supplies, and there were several cargo bays listed as sealed containers, do not open. He suited up in his environmental armor and checked his weapons one final time. The plasma rifle was fully charged, and he had enough ammunition for a small war. If there were any nasty surprises waiting on the Terra Nova, he would be ready. The docking procedure went smoothly. Too smoothly, perhaps. Usually, docking with a dead ship required some maneuvering to match its drift and rotation, but the Terra Nova seemed to be maintaining perfect stability. As the airlock cycled, Zarek's armor systems detected a standard human atmosphere inside the ship. That was strange. If the ship had been drifting powerless for weeks, the life support should have failed long ago. The interior of the Terra Nova was eerily quiet. Emergency lighting provided a dim red glow that cast long shadows down the corridors. Zarek's footsteps echoed strangely, as if the ship's acoustics had been designed to amplify sound. He made his way toward the bridge first, hoping to find some record of what had happened to the crew. The corridors showed no signs of struggle or damage. Everything appeared normal, as if the crew had simply vanished mid-task. The bridge was equally pristine. Coffee cups sat on control stations, still containing liquid that hadn't yet evaporated. Personal belongings were scattered around workstations. A data pad lay open on the captain's chair, displaying what appeared to be a routine maintenance schedule. Zarek accessed the ship's computer logs, but found them corrupted beyond recovery. Every attempt to retrieve information resulted in error messages or complete data loss. It was as if someone had deliberately wiped the ship's memory. He moved on to the crew quarters, hoping to find some clue about what had happened. Each cabin was neat and organized, with personal belongings still in place. Clothes hung in lockers, photographs sat on nightstands, and beds were made with military precision. But there were no people. 23 crew members had simply vanished without leaving any trace of their fate. The cargo bays were Zarek's next destination. If the ship had been carrying classified materials, that's where he would find evidence. The first 3 bays contained exactly what the manifest claimed: prefabricated building components and mining equipment. But the sealed containers in Bay 4 were different. They were made of a black metal that Zarek didn't recognize, and they hummed with barely contained energy. Warning labels in multiple languages covered their surfaces, but the human text was too complex for his translator to decipher completely. As he examined one of the containers more closely, Zarek noticed something that made his blood run cold. The container wasn't just humming, it was counting down. A digital display showed numbers decreasing steadily. 142307, 142306, 142305. Whatever was in these containers was on a timer, and he had less than 15 hours before something happened. Zarek's communicator crackled to life with an incoming transmission. The signal was weak and filled with static, but he could make out a voice speaking in heavily accented Galactic Standard. "This is Captain Yurix of the Mercenary vessel. Void Hunter. Can anyone hear this transmission?" Zarek responded immediately. "This is Zarek aboard the Scarlet Vengeance. I can hear you, Captain. What's your status?" "We found one of the human ships. New Horizon. Something's wrong. That crew is missing, but ship is active." The transmission dissolved into static before returning briefly. "Containers are counting down. Tried to leave, but ship won't let us. Locked onto us somehow." "Captain Yurix, can you hear me?" Zarek called into his communicator. "What do you mean the ship won't let you leave?" "Tractor beam. Coming from the human ship. Can't break free. Engines at full power, but we're being pulled back. Something is activating on board." The transmission cut off abruptly, leaving Zarek alone with the sound of his own breathing and the ominous humming of the sealed containers. He quickly made his way back to the Terra Nova's bridge and tried to contact the Void Hunter directly. His calls received no response, just empty static across all frequencies. With growing urgency, Zarek returned to his ship and began plotting a course to search for the New Horizon. If Captain Yurix and his crew were in trouble, there might still be time to help them. But as he prepared to disconnect from the Terra Nova, Zarek discovered something that turned his anxiety into outright fear. His ship's computer was reporting a problem with the docking clamps. They wouldn't release. He tried manual override procedures, emergency separation protocols, even considered blasting the clamps with his ship's weapons. Nothing worked. It was as if the Terra Nova had somehow locked onto his ship and refused to let go. The timer on the sealed containers continued its relentless countdown. 1347-22, 1347-21, 1347-20. Zarek realized with growing horror that he had fallen into the same trap that had claimed 7 other mercenary crews. The human ships weren't just carrying cargo, they were bait in an elaborate trap designed to capture anyone who tried to investigate them. He tried sending a distress signal, but his communications were being jammed by some unknown source. The nebula's interference combined with active jamming meant his calls for help would never reach anyone. As he sat in his pilot's chair, trying to think of a way out of this situation, Zarek noticed something moving outside his ship. Through the swirling gases of the nebula, he could see lights approaching, not the random twinkling of stars, but the organized running lights of spacecraft. 3 ships emerged from the nebula's concealment, their sleek black hulls unmarked by any identifying symbols. They moved with the coordinated precision of a military formation, taking up positions around the Terra Nova and Zarak's captured vessel. A new voice came over his communicator, speaking in crisp, unaccented galactic standard. Mercenary vessel Scarlet Vengeance. This is Admiral Chen of the Human Defense Initiative. You are trespassing in a restricted area and attempting to salvage classified human military assets. Zarak found his voice. I'm here on a legitimate salvage contract. The insurance company hired me to recover missing cargo ships. The insurance company does not have authority over classified military operations, Admiral Chen replied coldly. You have accessed materials that pose a threat to human security. Under Protocol 7, you are now considered a hostile combatant. Wait, Zarak protested. I haven't taken anything. I'm just looking for missing ships. You have observed classified defensive systems and accessed restricted areas of a human military vessel. That information cannot be allowed to reach hostile parties. The three black ships began powering up their weapons systems. Energy readings on Zarak's sensors climbed rapidly as the human vessels prepared to fire. But something unexpected happened. Instead of destroying his ship immediately, the humans seemed to be waiting for something. The countdown timer on the sealed container Zarak stared at the countdown timer, 11:47:33. Less than 12 hours before something terrible happened. His mind raced through possible escape plans, but each idea seemed more desperate than the last. He decided to explore the Terra Nova more thoroughly. If the ship was designed to eliminate intruders, there had to be some way to disable its systems. Human technology was advanced, but it wasn't magic. Moving carefully through the corridors, Zarak paid attention to details he had missed during his first exploration. The ship's design was subtly different from standard human cargo vessels. Hidden sensors tracked his movement, and sections of the wall showed slight variations that suggested concealed compartments. In the engineering section, he discovered his first major clue. Behind a maintenance panel, he found a secondary computer system that didn't appear on the ship's official schematics. This system was running independently of the main computer, maintaining life support and controlling the mysterious sealed containers. The interface was unlike anything Zarak had seen before. Instead of the usual holographic displays and touch controls common in most spacecraft, this system used direct neural links. A helmet-like device sat in a specialized chair, clearly designed for human use. Zarak's reptilian physiology wasn't compatible with human neural interfaces, but he had encountered similar technology during his years as a mercenary. With some modifications and a lot of luck, he might be able to access the system. Using tools from his ship, he carefully bypassed the safety protocols and rigged a crude interface that could read the system's data without requiring a direct neural connection. What he discovered made him wish he had listened to Thorne's warning. The Terra Nova wasn't a cargo ship at all. It was a mobile weapons platform disguised as a civilian vessel. The sealed containers didn't contain construction supplies. They held something called Genesis pods. According to the technical specifications, these devices could manufacture autonomous combat units using raw materials from the surrounding environment. The countdown timer wasn't measuring time until destruction, it was counting down to activation. When the timer reached 0, the Genesis pods would begin producing an army of robotic soldiers designed specifically to hunt and eliminate non-human life forms. But that wasn't the worst part. The system logs showed that this was just one of dozens of similar vessels scattered throughout human space. Each ship served as both bait and trap, designed to capture anyone who might threaten human interests and then eliminate them with extreme prejudice. Zarak understood now why 7 mercenary crews had vanished without a trace. They had all fallen into this same trap, lured by lucrative contracts to investigate ships that were actually automated killing machines. His communicator crackled with another transmission from Admiral Chen. Mr. Zarak, I trust you've discovered the true nature of your situation by now. You have approximately 11 hours before the Genesis pods activate. I thought you might appreciate knowing what you're facing." "Why?" Zarek demanded. "Why create such elaborate death traps?" "Because the galaxy isn't as peaceful as most species believe," Admiral Chen replied. "Humanity learned some hard lessons during our expansion into space. We encountered species that viewed us as nothing more than useful slaves or interesting specimens for experimentation. We decided that such encounters would never happen again." The Admiral's voice took on a colder tone. "The Genesis pods represent the ultimate expression of human defensive strategy. They create soldiers that are specifically designed to hunt whatever species triggered them. If you were Kithara, they would produce anti-insectoid units. If you were Vorthan, they would create units optimized for fighting energy-based life forms." "And since I'm Saurian?" Zarek asked, though he dreaded the answer. "The pods will manufacture hunters specifically designed to track and eliminate reptilian life forms. They will be faster than you, stronger than you, and completely immune to your species' natural advantages. They will not stop until every trace of Saurian DNA in this system has been eliminated." Zarek felt his scales go cold. The humans hadn't just created a weapon. They had created a weapon that adapted to its prey. No wonder no mercenary crews had ever escaped. But Admiral Chen wasn't finished. "Of course, there is one way to prevent the Genesis pods from activating. You could choose to remain aboard the ship until your natural lifespan expires. The pods are programmed to only activate if their target attempts to escape or if unauthorized personnel try to access the ship's systems. You're asking me to commit suicide." "I'm offering you a choice," the Admiral corrected. "A slow death of old age, or a very fast death at the hands of creatures specifically designed to hunt your species. Most mercenaries choose poorly." The transmission ended, leaving Zarek alone with the countdown timer and his growing desperation. 10:23:17. 10 hours and 23 minutes to find a solution. He considered his options. The human warships outside would destroy him if he tried to escape in his own vessel. Even if he could somehow break the docking clamps, he would be vaporized before he could jump to hyperspace. The Genesis pods would activate if he remained aboard the ship, creating hunters that would track him down no matter where he hid. And according to Admiral Chen, simply staying put would only delay the inevitable. But Zarek hadn't survived 30 years as a mercenary by accepting defeat easily. There had to be a weakness in the human plan, some flaw he could exploit. He returned to the secondary computer system and began analyzing the Genesis pod specifications more carefully. The technology was incredibly advanced, but it followed certain logical principles. The pods needed raw materials to manufacture their hunters. They required a power source to operate, and they had to follow programmed instructions. That last point gave him an idea. The pods were programmed to create hunters specifically designed to eliminate whatever species had triggered them. But what if he could confuse the system about what species that was? Using his limited access to the computer system, Zarek began examining the ship's biological scanners. These devices had analyzed his DNA when he first boarded, identifying him as a Saurian and programming the Genesis pods accordingly. But the scanners weren't perfect. They relied on genetic markers and cellular analysis to determine species classification. With the right approach, it might be possible to fool them. Zarek remembered the medical kit in his ship's emergency supplies. Among the various healing compounds and biological stabilizers was a bottle of cellular restructuring serum. It was designed to help injured mercenaries regenerate damaged tissue, but it could also temporarily alter DNA patterns. The plan was insane and would probably kill him, but it was better than facing an army of anti-Saurian hunters. If he could alter his genetic signature enough to confuse the scanners, the Genesis pods might not know what kind of hunters to create. He retrieved the serum from his ship and returned to the Terra Nova's medical bay. The ship's medical systems were more advanced than anything he had used before, but the basic principles were the same. Carefully, Zarek began introducing the cellular restructuring serum into his bloodstream using the ship's medical equipment. The process was agonizing. His cells began changing at the molecular level, altering his genetic signature in random ways. His scales began shifting color, and his internal temperature fluctuated wildly. The serum wasn't designed for such extensive use, and it was causing unpredictable changes throughout his body. 8:45:12, less than 9 hours remaining. As the cellular changes progressed, Zarek monitored the ship's biological scanners. Slowly, his genetic signature became more confused. The scanners began classifying him as multiple species simultaneously. Part Saurian, part Vorthon, part something else entirely. But the process was killing him. His organs were struggling to adapt to the genetic changes, and his nervous system was firing randomly. He could feel his consciousness slipping away as his altered cells failed to maintain proper brain function. 7:22:08. 7 hours remaining. Zarek forced himself to continue working despite his deteriorating condition. He accessed the Genesis pod programming and watched as the system tried to determine what kind of hunters to create. The confused biological readings were causing errors in the targeting protocols. Instead of designing hunters optimized for a single species, the system was trying to create units that could eliminate multiple different life forms simultaneously. The complexity of the task was causing processing delays and system conflicts. 6 hours exactly. The Genesis pods were beginning their preliminary manufacturing sequence, but they were struggling with the contradictory programming requirements. Error messages cascaded across the secondary computer system as the pods tried and failed to create coherent hunter designs. Zarek's modified genetics were causing the system to classify him as a new, unknown species that didn't match any existing hunter templates. The pods were essentially paralyzed, unable to determine what they should be hunting. But his victory was short-lived. Admiral Chen's voice returned over the communicator, and this time he sounded genuinely impressed. "Remarkable, Mr. Zarek. In all our years of operating these systems, no one has ever thought to alter their own genetic signature. You've successfully confused the Genesis pods, but I'm afraid that only delays the inevitable." The Admiral's tone became businesslike again. "The pods are programmed with a failsafe for exactly this situation. If they cannot determine the appropriate hunter configuration within 4 hours, they will default to their maximum threat response protocol." "Which means what?" Zarek gasped, his altered physiology making it difficult to speak. "They will manufacture Omega units, hunters designed to eliminate all non-human life forms regardless of species. These units are significantly more dangerous than the specialized hunters, and they operate with complete autonomy." Zarek felt his heart sink. He had bought himself some time, but ultimately made his situation worse. Instead of facing hunters designed specifically for saurians, he would now face creatures capable of killing any alien life form they encountered. 4:17:33. 4 hours and 17 minutes until the Omega units activated. His altered genetics were continuing to cause problems throughout his body. His vision was blurring and his coordination was severely compromised. Even if he could find a way to escape the ship, he might not live long enough to enjoy his freedom. But as he sat in the ship's medical bay, struggling to remain conscious, Zarek noticed something important. The cellular restructuring serum hadn't just changed his DNA. It had also affected his brain chemistry. His thought processes were becoming more fluid, less linear. And in that altered state of consciousness, he saw a solution that his normal mind would never have considered. The Genesis pods weren't just weapons, they were also manufacturing systems. They could create more than just hunters if given the right instructions. And according to the technical specifications, they could be reprogrammed by someone with sufficient access to the ship's systems. Zarak dragged himself back to the secondary computer system and began working with desperate urgency. His modified genetics had confused the biological scanners, but they had also given him an unexpected advantage. The system no longer recognized him as a specific threat, which meant it was allowing him greater access to restricted functions. 3:45:22. Less than 4 hours remaining. Using his expanded access, Zarak began reprogramming the Genesis pods. Instead of creating hunters designed to eliminate alien life forms, he instructed them to manufacture repair units designed to fix damaged spacecraft systems. The process required him to forge authentication codes and bypass multiple security protocols, but his altered brain chemistry was allowing him to think in ways that matched the system's programming logic. 2:30:17. 2.5 hours left. The Genesis pods accepted his new programming instructions. Instead of preparing to manufacture Omega units, they began configuring themselves to create repair drones that would restore the Terra Nova's damaged systems. But Zarak's alterations went deeper than simple reprogramming. He instructed the pods to prioritize repairing the ship's docking clamps, specifically to repair them by disengaging them completely. 1:15:08. 1 hour and 15 minutes. His body was failing rapidly now. The cellular restructuring serum had altered his genetics too extensively, and his organs were shutting down one by one. He could feel his consciousness fading as his modified brain struggled to maintain basic functions. But he had done everything he could. The Genesis pods were now programmed to create repair units that would free his ship from the Terra Nova's docking clamps. If he could somehow survive long enough, he might actually escape this trap. 0:45:33. Less than an hour remaining. Admiral Chen's voice crackled over the communicator one final time. Mr. Zarak, our sensors indicate that you've successfully reprogrammed the Genesis pods. I must admit you've exceeded all our expectations. No previous intruder has ever managed to turn our own weapons against us. Zarak could barely speak, but he managed to whisper into his communicator. Does this mean you'll let me go? Unfortunately, no, the Admiral replied, with what might have been regret. You've seen too much and learned too much. The existence of the Genesis pod network must remain secret. However, I can offer you one final courtesy. What? A quick death instead of a slow one. We can destroy your ship immediately, rather than waiting to see if your reprogramming actually works. It would be more merciful. Zarak closed his eyes and considered the offer. His body was dying, his mind was fragmenting, and even if his plan worked, he might not live long enough to escape human space. But he thought about all the other mercenaries who had fallen into these traps. Captain Yerix and his crew aboard the Void Hunter, Thorne's lost team, 7 other crews who had simply vanished without a trace. No, he whispered into the communicator. I want to see if my plan works. Isoro. Sir. The countdown timer reached 0 and the Genesis pods activated. But instead of manufacturing deadly hunters, they began producing repair drones exactly as Zarak had programmed them. The small robots swarmed over the Terra Nova's hull, focusing their attention on the docking clamps that held his ship. With mechanical precision, they began disassembling the locking mechanisms. Zarak felt a shudder run through both ships as the clamps finally disengaged. His vessel was free. Using the last of his strength, he activated his ship's autopilot with pre-programmed escape coordinates. The Scarlet Vengeance pulled away from the Terra Nova and began accelerating toward the edge of the nebula. The 3 human warships immediately opened fire, but Zarak's ship was already entering hyperspace. The jump to faster-than-light travel saved him from destruction, but he wasn't sure how long he would survive to enjoy his victory. His altered genetics were breaking down completely now. His vision went dark, and his breathing became shallow and irregular. As consciousness faded, Zarek managed to send one final transmission to Viren back at the space station. "This is Zarek. Mission successful, but humans, trap ships, death traps, warn everyone." The message transmitted automatically as his ship continued its jump toward safety. When Zarek woke up 3 days later, he was in a medical facility on a rim world far from human space. His ship's autopilot had brought him to the nearest medical station after detecting his critical condition. The doctors had managed to stabilize his genetics using advanced alien medical technology, but the experience had changed him permanently. His scales now showed patterns of multiple colors, and his brain chemistry remained altered in subtle ways. More importantly, he carried with him the knowledge of humanity's secret weapon network. The Genesis pods represented a threat to every non-human species in the galaxy, and someone needed to spread the warning. Within a week of his recovery, Zarek had contacted every major mercenary guild, information broker, and independent operator he knew. The word spread quickly through the galactic underworld. Avoid any job involving human warships. The message was clear and simple. Some contracts aren't worth any amount of money because the humans don't just defend their secrets, they turn their own ships into elaborate death traps designed to eliminate anyone foolish enough to investigate them. And that's why, to this day, no experienced mercenary will touch a job involving human warships. Because Zarek lived to tell the tale, and his warning saved countless lives. The humans still maintain their network of trap ships, waiting patiently for the next group of unsuspecting treasure hunters to take the bait. But now, at least, the galaxy knows what it's dealing with. Some species learned to fear humans for their military might or technological advancement, but the mercenary community learned something far more disturbing. Humans were patient enough to use their own ships as bait and clever enough to turn their victims' greed against them. In the end, that might be the most human trait of all, as had reached 12 Dhamma and was still decreasing. Admiral Chen's voice returned, but now it carried a note of grim satisfaction. "Mr. Zarek, you are about to witness why no intelligent mercenary takes contracts involving human warships. Consider yourself an object lesson for any others who might be tempted by easy money." The timer hit 11:59:59, and Zarek realized with crystal clarity that he had less than 12 hours to escape before whatever was in those containers activated. The humans weren't going to kill him outright, they were going to let their automated defenses do the work. He was trapped aboard a ship that was designed to eliminate anyone foolish enough to board it, surrounded by human warships that would destroy him if he somehow managed to escape. For the first time in his 30-year career as a mercenary, Zarek began to understand why some jobs paid so well, dits to retire comfortably. But as he sat in his pilot's chair, staring out at the stars, he couldn't shake the feeling that he was making the biggest mistake of his life. The human military was different from other species' forces. They were organized, disciplined, and apparently willing to kill anyone who got too close to their secrets. 7 mercenary crews had already learned that lesson the hard way. Zarek powered up his ship's engines and requested departure clearance from station control. As the Scarlet Vengeance pulled away from the docking bay, he noticed another ship following at a distance. It was sleek and black, with no visible markings or identification numbers. Human design, if he had to guess. The hunt was about to begin, and Zarek wasn't sure if he was the hunter or the prey.